Hello, I'm Troy Rafferty here on the People's Voice, and here we are in celebrating this month, which is Women's History Month, and I am privileged and honored to have one of the most powerful, compelling, and hardworking women that I know, and that I've had the privilege of practicing law with now. LaRuby May. So thank you for being here, LaRuby.
No, thank you for the invitation, Troy. Pretty excited to be here with you.
So let's talk a little bit, because you are, I mean, you do everything. You're all over. You are a community activist in certain respects. You do a lot of charity. You practice law at the highest levels. You're an entrepreneur. You pretty much do everything. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the work you're doing. Let's start off with some of the. I mean, you've been appointed by federal courts to head up and lead litigations involving some very massive defective products. So let's talk a little bit about that. One of them that you've just started working on is the what's referred to, I guess, as the hair relaxer case. Talk a little bit about what that is.
So yeah, again, thanks, Troy, for the opportunity to come and sit with you, right? and you know lots of people, so to be in that group of known people and friends of yours, I think is pretty amazing. But yeah, I've been very blessed, very thankful to be appointed along with a slate of other leaders. I think there's 35 of us who've been appointed by the judge in Chicago, in the Northern District of Illinois, to be the leadership team for hair relaxer. And
so, what is the hair relaxer? When we talk about hair relaxer litigation, what are we referring to? What's the crux of the case?
So the crux of the case is that women, specifically Black women, right, and you know, whether or not that's Black African American women or Black Caribbean women, but generally more speaking of women with a more coarse or texture of hair, a less straight texture of hair, you know, for many reasons, right, have needed to straighten their hair or felt the need to straighten their hair, whether or not it was to get a job. Sometimes we did it to, you know, for church, for Easter, or for proms, or for whatever reasons, right, that we, for some of us, it was about assimilating into kind of white or Western culture of having the straight hair. But we used the product, right, and the product was very well marketed to us. And in fact, you know, it was marketed to our children. There's a brand called Just For Me, and I think if you go into a Black church or a Black community and started singing the jingle just for me, like you know, it's like a line dance. People would join in it, and so and that was again about marketing towards our children, towards Black girls. And so what the litigation is doing is saying that the use of the product, the chemicals in the product, what we're finding out, they're endocrine disruptors, and essentially what the science is showing us that it leads to uterine and ovarian cancer.
Wow, and this is all being marketed specifically to, or generally, I guess I should say, to Black women and Black children.
Absolutely. I mean, to Black women, to Black children. And again, I think that when you think about a 8 or 9 or 10-year-old child that, you know, especially when I was a child back in the, you know, the 80s, right? The only images you see on TV of beauty are folks with straight hair. Right. And most of the time they didn't look like you. But again, the texture of the hair, or even, you know, I was talking to some folks, Troy, you know, that I went to Episcopal Day School here in Pensacola, where, you know, I was the only Black kid in my class. Right. And so when you have kids there in those situations that are looking and seeing images of their colleagues or their friends or on TV of folks with straight hair, then you want it. And then again, you get a jingle for kids, you market towards kids to beg their parents to put a product in their hair. Meanwhile, their brains are still developing while you're putting this chemical there. And you know, and then we see that, you know, that these chemicals and that, you know, the manufacturers knew about these chemicals. And, you know, I think it's important, Troy, that Black women are pretty much the only women in this country that can go to a 7-Eleven and get their hair products, or go to a corner store and get their products. So when you speak about the marketing of these products, you look and see that it was very specific and very targeted to a population of folk.
And they knew about it. They knew that these chemicals were going to be dangerous to kids, and yet they continued to market them and to line their own pockets. And I talk about this all the time on the People's Voice, and it's also that they can line their pockets, and you got a bunch of people, these executives sitting in boardrooms making decisions that are going to impact people's lives, also they can, they can just make more money, and that's it. And we see this time and time and time again. But I don't know, I want to make sure everybody out there that's listening knows the importance of this, because, woman ends up with uterine cancer. The first thing the last thing they think of is, was it the hair relaxer? And I think that's an important public service that we try to do here on the People's Voice, is to let people know, because you that wouldn't be an automatic. We're facing some legislation right now that is being shopped around the country to do away with the ability to advertise for what we refer to as mass tort cases like the hair relaxer. But the reality is, if you take that away, which there's constitutional issues that we won't get into, but the fact of the matter is, people don't know about these things unless and until you start seeing what's happening to people, and lawyers like you working on these litigations bring it out in the open.
Well, I think, part of what I've had the privilege to do, not only in hair relaxer, and we'll do continued hair relaxer, but even in my opportunity to work, on paraquat, right, is about educating. Obviously, we're lawyers, we're plaintiffs' lawyers, and we want to hold people accountable for what they put, the harms that they do for people in our community. And we want to, Troy, we want to fight the fight in the courtroom, but we also want to educate folks to make sure that they understand that there are products that you don't think about, right? Like, now, I'll tell you, I had hair relaxers growing up. It took me a while. I think, maybe it was high school when my mom allowed me to get my first one. It definitely wasn't middle school. But, Troy, one of the things that folks don't realize that who don't get hair relaxers is, even if you thought something was, getting a hair relaxer, sometimes it's painful. Right, you get scabs in your head, like it burns, right? But you never make that connection that it's going to be the reason why I have uterine cancer or ovarian cancer, or potentially have fertility issues. And I think manufacturers and distributors, they play on that, right? Like, or they benefit from folks being uneducated about the true impacts that they have, and I think they do that generally. But then specifically when you go into Black and brown communities, right, I think that it even becomes more, they rely even more heavily on folks being uneducated and underrepresented. So when we look at mass tort litigations, regardless of what it is, the disparate impact that those have on Black and brown and Native communities, I think, are what manufacturers and these folks that are lining their pockets with money, what they rely on.
Listen, the big pharma will target whoever they think they can make a nickel off of, regardless of the outcomes. That's just the truth. You mentioned something very interesting. You mentioned paraquat. You've also are one of the lead lawyers in the paraquat litigation. And talk a little bit about what that is.
So again, paraquat is a weed killer, right? And what we know is our brothers and sisters who are out there farming, many of them, we're coming up close to Easter into Mother's Day, and many of us, if our mothers are still alive, we're going to buy them flowers or send them flowers, right? Or we're going to send our children's mothers flowers, right? And not recognizing or being sensitive to the fact that there were folks whose livelihoods were to make sure that we had those flowers to be delivered to our mothers and to our sisters and to our aunts, and they were trying to make a living and using paraquat as a weed killer. And yet, getting it on their skin, dermal exposure to the chemical caused them to have a horrible disease called Parkinson's, and it's a terminal disease.
No cure for it.
No cure for it, and it gets progressively worse. And if you've not had an opportunity to engage with an individual with Parkinson's disease and to see someone or to live with a family member who's gone through the progression, it's a pretty amazing disease, and it's really one of the reasons why I'm so blessed to be a part of the leadership team, because all the clients we serve deserve the representation. But when you think about folks who are just trying to make sure you and I had food on our table, and sometimes they were doing cotton so we can have clothes on our backs, and again, the manufacturers of the product knew the harm that this would cause for people, and yet they still decided to make money versus to make things safe or to give warning to people before using it.
Profits over safety.
Always.
Same thing.
Always.
Same thing we see. History repeating itself.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about some other things that you do and that you've worked on. You worked on and some of this stuff. I mean, I am just so thrilled to have you as a part of the Levin Papantonio Rafferty firm, and just really not just because of the great lawyer you are, but because you also do a lot for other people, regardless of whether there's profit in it or not. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. I know you did a lot of work, out of Washington, D.C. in terms of kids being bullied or harassed. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I live in D.C. now, right? Mm-hmm. And so D.C. is kind of my other family neighborhood, and have a lot of, again, very blessed to have lots of opportunities to serve communities and specifically children. And there was a young lady that I had the opportunity to know. Actually, I knew her mother 20 years ago, right? Well before, even 25 years ago, maybe at this point in time, before the young lady was even born. And I started my own firm in D.C., right, doing some personal injury. Well, actually, I started out as a general attorney, right? I was doing more real estate and landlord and tenant law than I was doing anything in personal injury. And then, unfortunately, in March of 2018, my friend, the mother, Patricia Denson, came to me looking for representation to represent her in the wrongful death lawsuit of her daughter, Stormaya Denson Jackson, who lost her life. Stormaya committed suicide at the age of 12, and lost her life in D.C. And so prior to her mother coming to me, and in fact, Troy, you'll appreciate this, she came to me and she's like, "We want you to, want you to represent me." And I was like, "No, not me." That's not the type of law that I do. And she thankfully, she wouldn't stop. She said, "No, your relationship with Stormaya, your relationship with me, we want you to represent." And so then I had a co-counsel in D.C. and we took the case and we began to fight on behalf of Stormaya for the harm that was done for her that essentially led to her taking her own life.
Mm. And so talk a little bit about, because there was some legislation also, right? Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about that.
So while we were going through the journey of the litigation for Stormaya, one of the issues that we found, and Troy, this is an issue on both plaintiffs and defense side, right? We all hire forensic economists, right, to tell us what the value of life is, right? As plaintiffs, we want to know what's the value of our client, and defendants want to say, what's not the value of life, right? What's not the value. And so, in doing so, we recognize the flaws in the district law, and quite frankly, the only state in the country at the time that was not discriminating in the calculation of damages was the state of California. And so we met Bob Johnson, who is a forensic economist out of California, who single-handedly led the charge to change the law in California. So I had the opportunity to meet with Bob Johnson multiple times and say, hey, we're looking at Stormaya, and what, all the economists are saying is that not because she was poor, not because of where she lived, but simply because she was a woman, or simply because she was a female, and because she was African American, that her life was worth less than a individual who would have been male or white. And so we just began to look at that, and I was like, Stormaya was an amazing kid. Stormaya used to lead community marches in her community around gun violence and justice. Stormaya was the kid who took kids in the neighborhood to church.
She was only 12 years old.
She was only 12 years old.
Wow.
Like, she literally, her elementary school was impacted by her, like the leaders. Because again, Stormaya, had seen so many friends and people die in her life from violence and gun violence that she became an advocate at a very young age for justice. And so I knew the value of her life. Like, her family knew the value of her life. And so when we started getting calculations that put the value of her life, the calculations that we were seeing for the value of her life was less than the amount of money that the District of Columbia was paying to educate her every year. Mm. And so we began to look at it. And one of the things that I'm very fortunate to do as a lawyer, Troy, is not only fight, as I mentioned before, to fight in the classroom, but to fight on behalf of other clients that are similarly situated to the clients that I fight in the classroom
Well,
for.
because bullying and harassment has become a real epidemic, quite frankly, in the country.
Yeah, no, I mean, and again, like, so obviously, middle school is that age where kids kind of go through life's issues, right? And so, we even in our lawsuit, Troy, like when we look at the bullying and the issues that are happening in the middle school and quite possibly the issues that were happening with Stormaya, we really begin to look at the actions or the inactions of the school more so than the behaviors of potentially other students towards Stormaya as it relates to.
And how is the school? How is the school responsible?
So in our complaint against the school, we claimed that the school was negligence because Stormaya did what we would want Stormaya to do. So mind you, in 2018, when Stormaya took her life, if you go back and look at statistics, African American middle school children was the highest rate of suicides in the country. Wow. So anyone serving that population of children, especially as a counselor, should already know that's you're high risk, right? Mm-hmm. Simply because of the population that you're in. And Stormaya, again, did what we would have wanted Stormaya to do as it relates to giving notice to folks at school, letting what her thoughts were, and then their actions after Stormaya gave them notice was not they didn't provide that same notice to Stormaya's mother. They didn't give Stormaya's mother an opportunity to get her help.
So talk, if you're able to, talk a little bit about the bullying and harassment so that other parents that are listening to this can know what to look out for. So
again, I think that it, again, we don't look at Stormaya's case as a bullying case necessarily.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So we look at Stormaya's case really more so about the actions or the inactions of the school. Okay. And not their inactions or actions as it relates to a culture of bullying, although. Again, we since Stormaya's death, we had multiple people come to us, multiple parents who had their children to attend the school and say that they believed that the school had a bullying culture and those things. And I think that for parents who it just becomes so important for you to become involved in the school and knowing what's happening. But I think. Again, Stormaya's mother was active. She was involved in the school culture, so that's not necessarily what happened there. What I would tell parents to do, especially parents of African American children, especially in that middle school age, is not only making sure that you're involved, but making sure that you understand the credentialing of the teachers or the counselors that are serving your kids, making sure that they're up to date, right, and making sure, Not as many children are going to be able to be in an environment where they have teachers that look like them, and they're not going to be in environments where they have teachers who have cultural sensitivities to them being black kids or them being poor kids.
And you grew up in a school where Absolutely. The teachers did not look like you.
Yeah, didn't look like me, didn't understand the culture or anything like that, and so again. Making sure that you're asking the questions around the providers, that they're staying current on what's happening not only to your child specifically, but happening to the population of children, right? So, the school that Stormaya attended, it doesn't seem as though that they had a great understanding that Stormaya was in a population of children that across the country were taking their lives at higher rates than any other population of children.
Wow. Let's talk a little bit. It's Women's History Month this month, so I want to talk a little bit about women in your life who have been the most influential. I'm going to suspect one of them is going to be your mom.
Absolutely.
Who is an incredibly wonderful person and woman. Absolutely. But talk a little bit about that.
So, Mary May is, I shout out to Mary May. I try to give my mom a shout out every time that I get a chance. And Troy, you've met my mom and spent some time with her.
She deserves a shout out.
Yeah. And so, one of the ways I think is the best ways I've described my mom, Troy, is my mom managed to raise 7 children who all think, operate, and exist as only children. And that's a pretty
Well,
hard
that's
task.
interesting.
Right?
That's
Because
interesting,
we
yeah.
all think, and you know some of my siblings, and you've spent time with them. And so we all kind of think that, like, we're special. We all believe that, like, the world kind of revolves around us, and not in a, like, arrogant way, but in a way around of, like, being supported and being loved and being cared for. And so, for a mother to be able to do that and raise 7 kids that believe that individually, and are still, for the most part, good people, right? That's a pretty tremendous task for her as a homemaker. And so I'm very blessed, that my mom's still living, right, and that I still get to spend and share time with her, and and share this journey. I think that I am the lawyer that I am because I am the person I am, and I'm the person I am because of my mom.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, is there somebody? And you, I got to give Mary May another shout out. But talk a little bit about what it is that drove you to become the lawyer that you are. Like, what was there a case? Was there a situation? What was it that said, you know what, I want to be a lawyer?
And that's a good question, Troy, because I became barred in 2007, and I didn't practice until 2017. So there was 11 years that I was a barred attorney that I never practiced, and and we were talking earlier about the Stormaya case. I had started in 2017 after after I wasn't reelected to be a city council member in Washington D.C., and I was like, I didn't know what I was going to do, and so I was like, let me just become a lawyer. And I was practicing law. It was okay. I enjoyed it, but then Stormaya's case came, and it was personal because I knew Stormaya. It was personal because I was once a little black girl, and I got black nieces. And when I had the opportunity to work on her case and see how my voice and how the law, with the role of the law in personal injury cases and bringing justice for people, it changed me. I mean, that was the pivot. The Stormaya Denson case was the pivot in my legal career, which had at that time only been, probably about a year, right? But that was the pivot that motivated me to think about personal injury and the ways in which I could be a social justice advocate in the law. And I'm forever grateful, right? Which is one of the reasons. And we talked a little bit earlier about Stormaya, and I didn't go into much about the law that we changed, but fighting for the legacy of Stormaya is not only the right thing to do because we got the law changed so that now forever in the history of the district, in the calculation of wrongful death damages, you cannot discriminate. You cannot reduce it based on race and gender. That law just kind of recently passed through Congress. But I'll always remember Stormaya. I'll always remember how she impacted, how her life and her death, unfortunately, impacted me to become a personal injury lawyer and to take the fight that I was fighting in education and the fight that I was taking in housing and all the other fights. She really allowed for me to find my purpose in being a lawyer fighting those fights.
So she was an inspiration to you.
Oh man, she's again. I wouldn't be sitting here with you had not I had the pivot into personal injury, and I would have never had that. Other folks had tried to get me to do other type of law other than what I was doing before Stormaya's mother came to me. But Stormaya's case was that personal. Like Stormaya, again, like not only just because I knew her, but again because what she represented. Like she represented a young me. She represented an older Adriana, or Theophany, my nieces. And so because of that, it just, I'm grateful. Like I'm grateful for what she meant to me and in the legacy that she will have in the District of Columbia now with the law being named after her, but in my life of helping me to understand, right, helping me to find my purpose.
Good.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what we all, that's the meaning of life, right?
Yeah.
Trying to find your purpose, what it is. Well, on behalf of Levin Papantonio Rafferty, I'm grateful that you that you found that purpose because you've been a huge addition to our firm, and so I appreciate that. Talk a little bit about, so what message would you send? I mean, you're very successful, you're very powerful, you're very inspirational. Tell me, what would you say to a young woman that is kind of trying to find their way, trying to find their purpose, trying to wonder what it is, how you get to the position that you're in and the success that you've had in a world that, is the current world we live in, which is not all that, convenient for women, for minorities. And so talk a little bit about what you would say to a young female that came and asked you about how you get through life.
So I think that what I'll first say, though, Troy, is very powerful, very successful are your words and not mine.
Yeah.
I just think that I'm very blessed, right? I'm just very grateful for opportunities that I've been provided. And what I would say to young folks, or maybe even what I would have said to a younger me is trust the process, right? Like, and when I say trust the process, it's about trusting the process of your passion, of your heart, of what you want to do, right? In the process of whatever the process is that led you to think the way that you think. I mean, I've been, like we mentioned before, right? Like when I was at school, I was the only black kid in my class, right? So like I was just so different, and been different in undergraduate school. There was 49 black students out of 1,000, right? So like I've always been kind of different and wasn't as trusting of the process, that where I was supposed to be, where I was where I was supposed to be. And that my goal in life was to figure out how to be the best person in that experience, because that would lead me to the next experience. And so I would say to young folk to regardless of your situation, whether or not you're poor, whether or not you're in an underrepresented population, you're black or brown or LGBTQ or whatever it is, that in the moment that you're in, trust the process that got you there. And then as you begin to look at your imagination and your dreams of where you want to go, trust the process that'll take you there and continue to follow it. And I think that that's probably, the best, maybe the best advice. But I'll tell you, one of the most powerful sayings that was told to me, actually when I was elected into council, and it said that, one of the greatest privileges we have in this life is to serve. And whenever and most people want to serve, right? We just do, like human nature for the most part. But when you get the opportunity to have resources, you can serve a little bit differently. And so I would say to young folk or folk who want to be deemed successful or powerful by great folks like Troy Rafferty, is to embody the saying of that privilege in life is to serve, because that's all I do, Troy. Like however any external person defines that, my goal is to be faithful to the God that I serve, and to serve God's people. And so, if you get an opportunity to serve, then take advantage of that privilege.
Yeah, you and your family have always given back, and that's, I think, giving back to the community, giving back to the church, giving back to the poor, giving back to just about everybody that is in need. And I know that's something that you talked earlier about your mom, that she helped instill in you and your siblings. What so if we talk about giving back, okay? So what I always tell kids when I speak to kids is, it doesn't matter where you start from. Like you said earlier, if you're poor, if you're if you're black, if you're living in poverty, whatever it is, it doesn't matter where you start. It's not necessarily where you end up. It's the process. It's the journey that you go. And as long as you act with honesty and integrity and care about people, you will get to where you want to go. And I think that's a powerful message, and I hadn't really ever thought about it as trust the process. But that's really, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Trust the process. Go and do the things that you need to do and act with integrity and act with honesty. Be generous, be selfless, and you will end up wherever it is you need to be. So let me shift for just a second, because you've always been active in the political process.
Okay.
So talk a little bit about your activity in politics.
Well, Being a politician in D.C. is the greatest job I never want to have again.
I don't know how people. I got to be honest with you. You couldn't. I was talking to a politician the other day, and they said, maybe we should swap jobs for a day. And I said, you couldn't pay me enough to be a politician today.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. Politics has turned insane.
Yeah, man. And it's so not about what the intent of the political structure was intended to do for our country and for our people. And so. Again, I'm very blessed to have succeeded Marion Barry, right? Arguably one of the, most popular black politicians in the world, right? I met someone in Africa at one time that knew that knew Marion Barry, right? And so, I fell into politics really because it's still about service, right? And so, the timing of it.
Well, when you say you succeeded him, talk about what position were you in?
Oh, gotcha. So I had the privilege of serving the residents of Ward 8 in Washington, D.C. as a D.C. City Council member. So D.C. has our structure is, 13 council members that represent the city's broken up into different wards. And so Ward 8 is it's where I live. It's where my office is and population. It's also, as Mr. Barry, you'd say, it had all the highest negatives. So we had the highest unemployment, the highest poverty, the highest crime. We had, if it was a negative category, we had the highest. We also had we have the largest, the majority of black folk in the city live east of the river. And but yet, in 2015, those individuals deemed me worthy to vote me in to serve as their council member, again, succeeding Mr. Barry, who died while he was in office. And so I got the chance to do that. And it was a great experience, right? We were able to, I introduced a ton of legislation. I can't tell you that a lot of them got passed, but again, that's the politics of the council and chairmen and people, you know what I mean? Like, they set their own agendas. But we definitely put forth some pretty progressive legislation. We're able to. And in fact, I was talking to a young man actually last night, and I was telling him that while I was on the council, I was able to create some programs. I created a lifeguard program, and people don't think about that, right? But in the District of Columbia, in the summer, we have all these pools open at rec centers, and we have all these indoor pools. And lifeguards in D.C. are government employees. And so, and then we also know the issues with black and brown children and drowning, right? We drown at higher rates. And so while I was on the council, I worked with a woman named Athene Freeman, and we created a program and said, if you're we went into black communities east of the river, and we said, if you're 17 years old and you're not afraid of the water, within 2 weeks, I can get you swimming. Within a month, I can get you certified as a lifeguard, and then you will become an employee of the District of Columbia, and with the Parks and Rec. And so we started a program and started having a pipeline of young people who were not doing anything, right? Getting them certified as lifeguards. And then, now some of those young people are managers at pools. Some of them have gone off to college, and they've been able to find fitness centers or other places that have pools to get jobs while they're working in the summer. So being an elected official really gave me some opportunities to put into place some things that I believe will be longstanding programs that impact black and brown children for generations to come.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, listen, it's been a pure pleasure to have you on the show. I know everybody that listens to this is going to be inspired by you and all the work that you've done and the work you're going to continue doing. So I just appreciate you. I appreciate everything you do, and look forward to working with you on some more cases.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Right.
I appreciate it. Thanks,
Thank
Troy.
you.